Cue music, yeah, okay, hi, this is Steve Gillmor, and this is a special edition of the Gillmor Gang. We're coming to you live from the Dreamforce Expo, is it called? And we've got some regulars, and we also have some people actually who were regulars several times before on this Salesforce Live version of the Gillmor Gang. So I'll start with a well-known Salesforce friend and advocate. I don't know what we can say about what he's doing these days, but he's the chairman and CEO of Keys, and he's Adam Bosworth. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you.
Also joining us from Forbes magazine is Victoria Barrett. You're the associate editor.
Yes.
And part-time live blogger, I see.
As of this morning, yes.
Under protest, I hope.
Indeed.
Yes. And this guy, I think everybody in the world knows who he is, but they're not quite sure. That's Robert Scoble of Rackspace.
Nobody recognizes me in this hall.
Well, maybe out there.
Salespeople don't watch Gillmor Gang.
Well, that's true, but I mean, you're well known beyond the shores of Gillmor Gang.
Yep.
And also from Salesforce as well, John Toshek, who is a regular on the show. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, so we've got about half an hour here, maybe a little less, and let's start by getting some impressions from the professionals. I'll start with Victoria. What's your
I didn't
take?
think you would go to me when you said professional.
Okay, well, I'm not going to Scoble because he's the world's most popular authority.
Highly unprofessional guy over there.
So it's been an interesting day. You know, I have to think back to, it was 2 years ago, I did a big story on Mark and Chatter, and the idea was the notion of Chatter and bringing Facebook into the enterprise even just 2 years ago was really sort of outlandish when I spoke with people in the industry, in the sense that they had the sense that it was kind of this cute, trivial thing that wouldn't maybe amount to much. And I think what we saw this morning is the power of social inside business is not trivial. And it remains to be seen like how companies actually adopt this. There's like a huge cultural shift that I think a lot of companies will have to go through to get to where, you know, the customers that we saw this morning are. I mean, those are the early adopters in my mind. But social, I think, we can all agree, is no longer cute or trivial. It's a big force in business software now.
Adam Bosworth, you were at the forefront of the introduction of XML at Microsoft, as documented in the book Breaking Windows. And so you have a lot of experience with things that start small and then gather a lot of motion and power. And some would argue, I think John Toshek would, that the birth of XML and its move into the broad enterprise was the beginning of what we are now seeing play out here.
I don't know if it was the birth of it. I mean, as soon as Facebook came along, you know, it became obvious that something very different was going on. And, you know, my experience has been different than Victoria's. We roll out to enterprises every day, and we actually get more resistance on the cloud than we do on social, which is fascinating. We walk into company after company, and they actually kind of don't pay much attention to the social. Think of it as the Trojan horse. The cloud gets their attention, like, oh, you're not running in our computers. But the social is, oh yeah, well, it's like Facebook. Okay, we get that. And then they deploy it, and then they suddenly discover their employees are behaving very differently than they used to, and then we get their attention. But I think that, you know, it was all an enabler. The technology we all built back in, basically from 96 to 2000 was an enabler for what we're seeing today, but it was just an enabler. Ultimately, there would have been some other enabler. People like to talk to each other. They like to see what other people are saying. They like to see what other people are doing. And they're going to figure out a way to do it as soon as they can.
Robert?
Yeah, you know, what Mark really talked about this morning was that the continuation of business is turning social. I mean, it was amazing when he asked how many people are on Facebook doing business, and nearly every hand in the room went up, even for Yelp, right? Which is an evidence that the world of business is moving mobile and moving social, and that seemed to be the whole theme of the 3-hour keynote this morning for Salesforce.
John Tasha, jump in.
I agree. The phenomenon of social was, it was more than 2 years ago when you did your story, when Mark was on Facebook and said he learned more about employees in an hour than he did in several weeks, of just normal email style communication because of the social network. And it, bringing it into the enterprise really changes things. And now by adding some enterprise capabilities around that and extending that out, it connects your people to different places, so your institutional memory to your partners and your communities and the things that are talked about here.
I thought the General Electric part of the keynote was the most interesting because General Electric's putting sensors on turbines, listening to the sound that those turbines make, and then they're kicking off things into the social network, into Chatter, which then a tech support person can see, oh, this jet engine needs maintenance, and they can talk about it with all the support personnel. How are we going to get that?
And better design the engine to begin with, I think, or redesign it. It just iterate faster on things that they wouldn't have known before.
I was most suspicious of that part. I think most social conversations, you have to have a desire to be in the conversation. There are two fundamental human desires you're reacting to. Either you want to perform well, meaning you do your job well, and the social is part of an enabler, or you want to go meet someone or have a good time, and the social is part of an enabler. Well, it clearly wasn't the latter. You're not hanging out having fun, noticing that the turbine's spinning a bit fast. So it's got to be the former, right? But then I thought you were going to want an aggregator. To treat that one as a social conversation at the level of the jet made less sense to me than at the level of a set of the engines for your fleet or something. Because one of the things we know about social, it's a tipping point. You have to have enough people talking enough of the time to be interesting enough to come back every day. If you don't have this problem, Robert, so you probably can't understand it because about 40 million people follow you. But for the rest of us, the thing we've discovered is, fundamentally there is a tipping point, and social has to produce enough things that you can mail the people and say, look, who else is saying X, and they'll come back. And I was skeptical the turbine was going to do that.
I thought on that note of a willingness to participate, when the CEO of Virgin America said, if you have a customer complaint, take it to Twitter and Facebook, not to our 1-800 customer call center. I thought that was really powerful. The notion that your voice is stronger in those networks than it is in the traditional media. Now that's Virgin America. I have complained about United many times, and nothing has happened. Does anyone listen?
Even when you praise United, I have a picture of a United jet at Jackson Hole on my iPad, and I post that.
That's because Jackson Hole has the best airport on the planet.
Absolutely.
That's not a compliment.
You asked if anybody's listening or not. Are you listening to? Why don't you just switch over to Virgin? They just started their Gold
I'm flying
Platinum
to New York
program.
in 3 weeks, and I'm taking your.
Absolutely.
But the reason businesses like Rackspace listen and build teams to listen on Twitter and would rather you talk with us there is it's cheaper. If you pick up a phone call, there's one guy or one girl who has to talk to you, and that's all they can do.
Right.
And on Twitter, I can answer 20 questions in the same amount of time, because it's like email. We can part out our time.
You also do it faster and in a better level of engagement too, because it's much more real time. It's not this kind of a phone call is, it's anathema to kids nowadays, right? They don't like to talk on the phone. They like to do more, real time communications.
It is more powerful on the customer's standpoint too, because if you put something into Twitter, it can go places.
Yeah.
It might be only 50 people that see it. It might be 5,000. It might be 500,000.
Exactly.
Right. You have a bully pulpit, and you know it. You have the ability to be heard by large numbers of people when you're upset.
But I look at it the other way. As a business, as a person, I bias my life toward being public, because if I answer your question in public, maybe I help 3 other people. That's 3 times more people with that moment of time than I would help if I picked up the phone and helped you on the phone, or helped you just in email where that conversation.
And the future is taking that information that's aggregating your
Mark Benioff is just walking by with Richard Branson, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's him. they're going to be having a fireside chat just after the show in about 4:30.
Wouldn't you love to listen in on that conversation?
Yeah.
We're
the
just a great
parabolic
example
mics
of
when
a
we need 'em.
non-scalable conversation. If he took that 10 minutes of time and had that on Chatter, every employee at Salesforce would know what they're talking
We'll
about.
make that recommendation.
Or if you put it on Facebook in a SoundCloud audio file,
Yep.
or you put it on video like what we're doing, more people can listen in.
Right.
And that means that conversation has scale to
You're right. That's old medium is broadcast. I mean, new medium is much more of an engagement model.
Of course, it still is probably more interesting when it's just one-to-one. They might be talking about seeing the Red Hot Chili Peppers tonight. They might be talking about, I don't know, partying in Hawaii, and we don't know.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Did any of us really think that when we first started using Twitter and direct messages that this thing would fan out in the same way? What was your thought? Did you think it was going to get as big as it did?
My thought? Well, Evan used to work for me, and my first thought was, are you kidding? Who's going to look at changing status messages? But once I got over that, and I got a long lecture from my son about how this was going to revolutionize marketing, which was a pretty prescient lecture because it was in the middle of 2007.
How old is your son?
Well, he's now turning 30, but he was 25 then.
And he was also in a startup at the
He
time.
has his own startup in Beijing, but he saw that coming. Then I went back and took a look and thought, oh yeah, I guess this could be used that way. Will it be used that way? But I still think it's interesting how you decide when you want public discourse versus private discourse. I mean, most of the demos today emphasize simultaneously this paradox of public discourse in a walled garden. If you notice, it's Chatter, but it's safe and secure and in our garden.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because you're one of the inventors of XML, or one of the major proponents, which led to RSS, and then RSS sort of died. We talk about that on the Gillmor Gang all the time because of Twitter, because of Facebook,
Right.
because of LinkedIn, because of Chatter.
XML died too, but that's a separate discussion.
And do you think that's a bad thing or a good thing? Where would you have liked XML to have gone? Could XML do what Chatter does, where we have conversations live with people all over the world?
I think it's evolution in action. I think, the first precursor that would have predicted it was Google. You look at Google and how you search, and everything got reduced to a text box. All the complexity of all the possible ways you could search came down to type it in text and pray, because you don't have the energy or the desire or the abstraction to do something harder. We saw that in Amazon too, which used to ask you publisher and author, and then boom, just type. We see the same thing in XML. So it went away and was replaced by two much lower tech technologies. Twitter, 140 characters and some hash marks. Or JSON, no typing, no schema. Just get some content out there between apps and don't worry. By and large, 10 times as many people can deal with something simple and non-abstract as can deal with something complex and abstract. And so, by and large, the complex abstract things lose. Vox populi.
Victoria, did you see this train approaching? I mean, obviously, you talked about social at the beginning of the show, but
Yeah.
this whole, the building blocks of social, Twitter, Facebook, did you see them as important as people like Mark Benioff did?
No, I have to admit I didn't. I mean, when Mark and I first started chatting about this, I was suspicious because I think I immediately thought, well, doesn't this just become a huge waste of time? It's like your email inbox, but it's constantly bleeping at you. And what I missed was, Jason Maynard of Wells Fargo explained this to me months ago, and I think we're seeing this especially today, that the power of Facebook is photos, right? We're sharing our photos online. I think the power of Chatter is going to be what we share on Chatter, whether these be the more structured stuff that end up shared on Chatter. So it isn't so much that I'm having cute conversations on Chatter. It's what I'm doing that's related to my job that happens on Chatter. And that's going to be about documents. It's going to be about files. And that's why we saw the Chatterbox announcement today.
But that opens up an interesting conundrum. I mean, if you say that Chatterbox and files are to Chatter in the enterprise, as photos are to Facebook and albums, what is the search model? Fundamentally, there's a big difference here. You don't really care about the photo taken 2 months ago, and there's always the timeline.
Right.
But you do absolutely care, how do you go find
that
the file?
Customer document.
Right? So discovery is the one thing no one's talking about in the room.
Great
as
point.
soon as you move to a social media for the enterprise as opposed to social media for social. And I think that's going to be, I mean, the really impressive thing today was also the thing that opens up that question, which is, you know, we're looking at not one, but two inflection points. Normally any inflection point kills a leader, right? Mobile is completely replacing the web. That's a massive inflection point. It's arguably bigger than the web replacing Windows, and that was a big inflection point. And then simultaneously, social is replacing non-social. So those are huge. Normally, either one of those would kill a leader, and some upstart would come along and be disruptive, and you'd be dead. But this company's embracing them, right? It's jumping at them on both feet. Very impressive, and they're doing what Mark always does. They're learning from the consumer. The one gotcha when you do this is, how do you modify what you're learning from the consumer to make sense in the enterprise? Because files are not photos.
Well, isn't Instagram leading the way here? The reason Mark bought Instagram for $1 billion is not the photo.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg. It's not the photos. It's all the metadata around the photo. Because each, like I take a picture of you right now, like I just did. The metadata around the photo is like a like, because it tells us where you are. And it tells us it joins our social graph.
Absolutely, I'm in violent agreement with you. I'm just saying that the user interface that actually does what Google does for these files using that metadata, and then helps you find what you want that was in the chatter feed, and takes into account that context, the subject of that chatter, who was talking to who about what, is still coming, right? So there's a big amount of money to be made for someone doing search in this context.
The other thing that's coming at us is these predictive searches. You know, Google, you had to tell it, hey, we want sushi San Francisco. We're soon going to have phones. The Siri team told me this, that they're working on predictive searches to figure out what you need next before you even think about searching for it, and it'll tell you, hey, it's lunchtime. Let's go.
Believe it or not, they call that the next best action. It doesn't mean the next best, it's like second best, it means the next.
Well, we're going to be wearing Google Glasses in a year or two, or I hear Apple's working on them, right?
You will be. You will be.
You're not going to wear them?
No.
He'll see things that you don't.
But you're the same person who said you wouldn't do Twitter and wouldn't do Facebook, right?
Right.
You're right this time. You were wrong the last time, so was I, but you're right this time.
We're not going to all be wearing Google Glasses.
I got enough trouble seeing ahead of me.
I'm just getting a jack in the back of my head, I think, you know.
That's coming.
I think the Google Glasses are fabulous. I mean, I mean already, I'm 57, right? The internet is a memory augmentation tool. I have that senior moment. I can't remember the name of the actress in the movie. You know, I grabbed my iPhone and 10 seconds later, I remember it's Natasha Henderson, whatever. The glasses are just more of the same.
Yeah.
It's like, your vision is fading, great. Just adjust the focus to...
I can't promise the first ones are going to work, but eventually they will work. We're already seeing iPad apps coming out that listen to the conversation on the Gillmor gang and would pull information up as we're talking. Imagine we could talk to this thing called MindMill. It's coming out in a couple months, and we could say, pull up this quarter's sales figures and put it on a screen.
I can imagine dinner time conversation.
The one challenge there, I mean, Siri's unbelievable, right? I mean, as soon as you use it, you have one of these eureka moments. The only challenge is almost all this technology that does this recognition does better with a limited vocabulary than an unlimited vocabulary, because there's fewer things to pick between. You know, did they say dish or, you know, does is easier than all the possible DI words. So as they generalize it, it's going to be harder. But
all right, let me ask you a hard question, because you were responsible, and I say that in both connotations, for Outlook Web Access. And the birth of what became known as, you know,
Ajax.
So the unintended consequences of Ajax. You want to expound on that a little bit, and whether there might be some unintended consequences of this social wave?
Actually, I think the amazing thing about Ajax is that the intended consequences, 6 years later, after this long stillborn birth, suddenly popped out. I mean,
yeah, but for Google, not Microsoft.
Right, because Microsoft
it was born in a holding action by Microsoft.
If you're a company that believes in selling a thick client, Ajax is your idea of hell. It's part of why I left there in '99. You know, I was not popular with either.
Also, why you were sued in 2000.
No, it wasn't why I was sued. But anyway, I was actually technically never sued. I was merely threatened a lot. But But I think Ajax has actually done exactly what it was supposed to do. It's made Pages interactive. Now, it may be hitting the end of its lifespan. I mean, people are starting to wonder. In some sense, it is hitting the lifespan because of this. This thing is changing.
To your point, you know, mobile is taking
I mean,
over the
as soon
web.
as the web goes away, I mean, what everyone's doing right now, including Salesforce, we saw this at the conference, is fighting a rearguard action with HTML5. They're trying to make web pages that work on mobile rather than rewrite both to Android and to the iPhone natively, because it would be a huge pain in the butt to do. But they're losing. Look at Path versus Facebook. They've started backing up. I mean, ultimately, all those things you just gave me credit for, thank you very much, are going to go away in the next decade anyway. In fact, less. Probably 7 years, would you say, Bob?
I think the world starts looking more and more like notifications.
It does. It's push and mobile and smart voice, and everything else we knew is gone.
All right,
Social.
and speaking of everything, we're gone. I want to thank Adam Bosworth. I want to thank Victoria Barrett, the infamous and
I'll see you with
ever-present
your glasses.
Robert Scoble. Yeah, we'll see you. I won't see you because I'll have these glasses.
I'm surprised you don't have the glasses.
Next year.
And John Toshek, our resident Android fanboy. I'm going to be getting my iPhone on Friday, and the rest of you guys can just,
Wait in line.
I am waiting in line at the Paul Walter store tomorrow night with a bottle of wine.
This has been the special edition of the Gillmor Gang. I'm Steve Gillmor. I want to thank Dreamforce. It's 95,000 this year. Next year, we're going to have to find a new city, I think.
It will be the city.
Yeah, it will. Okay, we'll see you again next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.